Irvine Welsh burst onto the literary scene in 1993 with Trainspotting. Since then, he's written 9 novels, the latest of which is The Sex Lives of Siamese Twins. In fact, give him one more big round of applause before I ask a question.
Thank you.
Creative writing teachers everywhere say, write what you know. Your new book is from the perspective of a 30-something gym junkie, bisexual American woman in Miami. How so?
It's kind of strange because the first thing I did was, when I finished the book, I wanted to give it to some American women that were in their kind of, round about kind of late 20s, early 30s, to read it. And so I gave it to my wife, who's American, and she's 33. And she read it, and she said to me, God, these 2 characters are more like you than any other character you've had in fiction. And that was very, I don't know if it's true or not, but that was very disconcerting to me, because you always think that it's got to be the kind of Scottish junkie that's more like me, not the American fitness fanatic, so yeah, it was a kind of, it's a very weird thing to think that sometimes when you're kind of, because, writing is such a, for me anyway, writing is very much a kind of subconscious thing, you tend to let the subconscious do the heavy lifting when you write, and you think that characters that, their biographical details are much further from your own, there's going to be nothing of you in them. But it never works out that way. I think that there's parts of you in every kind of character you write, because I think we operate in a kind of quite a narrow bandwidth. But when you start to write, you're starting to take out bits of yourself that you kind of underuse. Hopefully underuse, and hopefully you underuse your inner Begbie or your inner sort of Bruce Robertson. Like you don't want to be overusing these ones too much. But you do dredge up kind of things from yourself that that you kind of repress in your daily life.
You might want to repress your inner Begbie a bit.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah, definitely, yeah.
It is in many ways a departure of a book for you. Do you think of it as your first American novel? You're now American-based. It's your first entirely American-set one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see. I mean, I wrote a novel called Crime, which was kind of largely set in Miami as well, even though it had a Scottish protagonist. This is very much, there's not a single Scot in this. I think there's only one reference to Scotland where Lucy says, like, I don't want to watch them. She's talking about Lena's trying to get her to go to an art house movie. And she says, I don't want to go to some kind of strange film with people with Scotland and Bosnia and speaking funny languages that you can't understand. So there's not a big kind of Scottish connection at all, or any real Scottish connection with the book. But I didn't really think of it like that way at the time. You kind of you get immersed in character and story, and you realise that that all the other issues, like kind of sort of gender and nationality and age and all that, they're very much kind of superficial furnishings. You don't really, when you're writing the character, for example, you don't really think that you're writing women. In the same way, if you write the Trainspotting characters, you don't really think of them as men. You're not consciously aware that you're writing kind of male characters. You're just writing characters, basically.
It's interesting, though, because you are a writer who's so synonymous with Scotland, and so much about so much of what you're celebrated for is that question of voice, This is no disrespect to that excellent American accent you just did, but but you still said film in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I was in New Zealand and everybody makes their vowels into E's there, and in Scotland we make our vowels into U's, so everything was kind of quite weird, like, it's like, film.
That shift, I mean, your last novel before this one was Skag Boys, which was the prequel to Trainspotting, and part of the nature of that book is it's back to a kind of Thatcher era, and it's a period when you were living back in that part of the world. Do you think that you'll be able to keep writing about contemporary Scotland and the contemporary UK?
The answer to that is yes, because I've finished a book that's coming out next year, which is about a taxi driver in Edinburgh, so I'm kind of back on that turf again. That's all done now, and that'll be out next year.
How different is it writing about the place when you're a long way away from it?
I think it's weird because, it's like what happens when you grow up in a place. You think of it as being very mundane, and you think about all the exotic things that's happening elsewhere. I always thought about Scotland, it's rainy, it's cold, it's kind of sort of a bit dull, and I wish I could leave and go somewhere that was more exotic. And then you realise that it's the fucking weirdest place you've ever been in your life, And writing about it, to me, one of the great things about kind of having that perspective of distance is that you do see it in a very different way, and you just, I really enjoyed writing this last book that I've just done that's coming out in next year. It was just so fantastic to kind of rediscover the place from that distance, so not being kind of right up close to it again, but. And it's also a very exciting time for Scotland. It's kind of, with the referendum coming up and all that, it's like the country's kind of reinventing itself, yeah.
Security.
Yeah. Yeah, the country's kind of reinventing itself from the inside out. And, I was just saying to some friends there that whenever you went to Scotland, Scottish people are always really lovely to outsiders. They like people coming into the country, but they fucking hate each other. They're always so nasty to each other. And the last few times I've been back, everybody's been really nice to each other, which is kind of strange, but it's also crap for me because it doesn't really do me any good. I've got nothing to write about. But it was very, very exciting to see this happening, yeah.
It feels like there could be few, in terms of settings, few more extreme departures from Leith to Miami. What is it that drew you to Miami in particular? And as you say, this isn't the first book you've set there.
Well, it's like, I've kind of had a place in Miami for quite a while now, and when you come off the flight from here in Chicago, you get outside and the sun's out, and you feel your IQ just steadily ebbing away, and it's like. And it's such a visual culture, everybody's practically wearing no clothes, and you think, I'm this kind of milk bottle skinned kind of beer gutted Scotsman, what the fuck am I doing here, So the first thing you do is you're straight into the gym, and you watch it, the food's so good, you're much more body conscious, you're not wearing clothes or hardly any clothes. And you're suddenly in this very, very visual culture. It's a beach town. It's full of photographers and models because of the light. The Condé Nast shoots happen there. Full of artists as well. So it's a very, very visual culture. Completely the opposite of Edinburgh, really. And kind of weather-wise and sort of temporally. So it's just, and the reason it attracts me to write about. I can't really write about Chicago, and when I lived in Dublin, I found that I couldn't really write about Dublin because both of those cities are kind of. There's so many writers in those towns that they kind of go back, and there's people that are writing about these places that have kind of got them in their DNA, whereas. Miami is a kind of transient place. It's a city that's forming. It's a new kind of Ellis Island. It's a new gateway to the Americas, And they say about Miami, it's like you can shake the map of the United States, and everybody that's not tied down to a job or a relationship kind of ends up drifting down the bottom to Miami, And it is like the last chance saloon in the United States. So obviously because you've got all these kind of beautiful people kind of on spring break, kind of smashed out their skulls and all that, kind of flopping around. You've got all the sexual predators that kind of prey on them, watch out for anybody over 30 in a Hawaiian shirt and Bermuda shorts and flip-flops. That's a sex offender, standard sex offender Miami uniform, I wear it myself all the time,
That's a very valuable community service announcement right there.
And red socks. Watch out for the red socks, guys.
Yeah, dangerous. But Sex Lives of Siamese Twins isn't just a departure because of setting. As we said, the characters, the kind of the voice of it is quite different. The central character, Lucy Brennan, on page 67, there's a moment in this book which makes it clear it's quite unlike what you've written before, and it's when Lucy says, "I seldom drink and I never take drugs."
Yeah, I mean, I think what the two characters, there's one's a fitness trainer, the other one's an artist, and what I was kind of trying to get at is, but a lot of things I'm trying to get at with the book. I mean, one of there's kind of three kind of I think major themes to it that, at least within my own head. The first one is I was trying to look at the 24-hour kind of breaking news culture in America, which is huge. And which kind of means that I mean, there was one survey in one county, and I think I don't know which kind of southern state it was, but one of the southern states, and they said that that more people knew the local breaking news station's phone number than they did the emergency services 911 number. So it's like, so the breaking news are not just like ambulance chasers now, it's like the emergency services, the fire engines and the police cars, and the ambulances are actually chasing the breaking news team because somebody tips them off first. And it's also that thing that you have the celebritization of, somebody will be a story, and then they'll have them, they'll cross-examine them and grill them, and then they'll control the narrative of what goes on with that person. So the person will become a celebrity. So the whole celebrity culture is big there, and that's basically what happens to Lucy. She has the same kind of narrative as the actual two real Siamese twins. She becomes a kind of almost like a reality kind of sort of media celebrity as a result of something that she does early on in the book. And I think the second thing is the American obsession with numbers. If you look at any sports channel in America, it's just all about numbers, and everything is about numbers. Everything's about measurements, and it's all about measuring people and quantifying people and sort of, and so you've got that whole self-improvement culture, but also the obesity culture as well, the entitlement. I can eat loads because I want to. I'm a fat American. I'm entitled to get goddamn fatter if I like. Give me some more of that. Give me some more of them fries. Give me some more of them ribs. So there's that kind of entitlement culture, but also a self-improvement culture. Like, my God, you've let yourself go. So get yourself started out and all that. That's a kind of a huge thing there. And the third thing I was trying to do was look at this kind of this horrible dichotomy between sport and art in our society, which kind of really gets on my nerves because I've always been into sport and I've always been into art, and I don't want to be called this dumb jock or this kind of poncy nerd because I'm both really, and I think I hate the way that the education system and society kind of try and pigeonhole us into being one or the other of these things, and it's kind of stopping us from being integrated human beings, this whole kind of sort of division thing. And I wanted to look at two characters, one who was very sporty, one who was very arty, and in some ways they complete each other. They see that the other one does have something they need, and it's something that can kind of that they can kind of gain from being around.
And you explore those three things really wonderfully in the book. The gym culture is where the kind of aggressive kind of masochism in this book comes in. I mean, it's quite, as obviously I spend quite a bit of time in the gym myself, but let's pretend for a second I don't. How much of that is the product of research? Are you sitting there letting someone shout at you that you're hideous?
Yeah, I mean, the genesis of it was when I was in the gym one time, and there's two women training there, and one was shouting at the other one, and I kind of turned around and I saw that the other one was kind of bursting into tears. She was going through the routine, and I thought, you're fucking paying somebody to do that to you. But so I started to kind of extrapolate as what that relationship might be, what might be kind of feeling that relationship. So and it's just through the lens of my kind of imagination, I thought that there must be something, there must be some kind of there's obviously got to be some kind of deep need that's being met there, and it might not always be a kind of healthy need, So I took off from there, and it was also when I was writing that book. It was when there was a great crash, and they built all these tower blocks in downtown Miami to try and revitalize the downtown area, which was absolutely a fucking stupid mistake because Miami is all about beaches and beach culture. It doesn't really need a big downtown with lots of condos. So you had these deserted buildings, which were like which were just just massive, beautiful kind of new sort of tower blocks kind of lying empty. So I was kind of imagining that something could be taking place in one of these empty spaces.
I guess I'm curious about how into that culture you are, though, when you're in Miami. I mean, are you just an observer and an imaginer about it?
No, I get completely kind of obsessed with going to the gym, and I go to this boxing club in Miami, and I go there about kind of 5 times a week. I get really obsessed with it. I do all the circuit training and the boxing and sparring and stuff like that, and then you get to that kind of conceit. You think, well, I've finally got into my 50s now, and I've kind of grown up. I'm not a big partier. I don't sort of drink anymore. And then you come back to the UK, and you're fucking smashed every night, And you think it's not because I've grown up. It's just because I'm environmental. I'm very easily led by and because there's not a big drinking culture in America, and it's certainly not in Miami. It's much more of a kind of working out, healthy, kind of eating, healthy exercise culture, and I'm very influenced by that. And as soon as and I think this is me now, and then I get back over to Scotland or down in London, over to Dublin, and it's like everybody's, have a drink, come on, let's get fucked up. And I'm going, you're right enough, let's get fucked up, So, so it's like, I'm actually looking forward to getting back to America, and because Australia is very much like the UK in terms of its culture, because this last week in Sydney, it's like, come on out for a drink, come on. I go, all right then, yeah. So it'd be nice to get back to Chicago again, and when they say, it's like this whole, the different thing about like Chicago and Edinburgh is like when they say, let's go out, we'll just have a couple, and we'll go out for a couple, and they'd actually do mean a couple of beers, and you go home. Whereas in Edinburgh, they mean a couple of days, basically.
God forbid if you ever go and live like in regional China for 6 months, you'll just assimilate entirely.
Well, I mean, I was doing this thing where I was trying to get in, this is years ago, I was trying to get into Darfur to cover the Darfur crisis for the Daily Telegraph, and at that time they weren't allowing any foreign journalists visas. So I was hanging around Khartoum, and Khartoum isn't a kind of place that you can easily get a drink. In fact, you just can't. And I wandered around Khartoum trying to get the visa sorted out, and the British ambassador in Khartoum at the time was a guy from Edinburgh, and he said, I've got this bar downstairs in the embassy that's it's illegal, but there's nothing they can do because it's in the embassy, as long as it's downstairs. So I said, great, so I spent 3 days there, And I said, any chance of getting that fucking visa? My liver's about to explode here, So eventually I did, and I got out there,
The only story from Darfur entirely written in a bar. That's quite an achievement. So if the two characters in this book, Lucy and Lena, your wife thinks are more like you than any other characters that you've written, why is that?
I think it's that kind of, I think I'm quite kind of compulsive obsessive, and again, you like to think that you're kind of picking better obsessions as you get older, and I think that there's kind of the problem that we have. It's like that we're all tied into this kind of consumer capitalist kind of economy where we're taught to be consumers. It's like, if somebody's putting on a lot of weight, just eat less. That's as simple as that, basically. But we can't do that. We've got to kind of. It's interesting now. We have to replace overconsumption with overconsumption of something else. So we can't just eat less. We have to kind of get the new exercise regime. We have to get the new diet pills. We have to get the new special diet. We have to consume another product, basically, rather than just kind of stop consuming. It's it's overconsumption that's caused the problem in the first place. So this is a kind of thing. But I think that I've always been quite obsessive compulsive. I prefer to use that term than addictive personality. I don't like using that term. Because people that have got addictive personalities never really do anything. At least obsessive compulsive people like me get fucked up on different on their different obsessive compulsions. So people, I hate it when people go, "Oh, I'm not doing that because I've got an addictive personality." What? So I think I think having if you had an addictive personality, you would fucking do it. That's the whole point of it, So. I think compulsive obsessive is better, So so I think I do have that compulsive obsessive thing, and I think that maybe the thing she was looking at from Lena's point of view is that I think one of the Lena character in the book, she has a problem in that she doesn't come from an artsy family, and I think if you don't come from an artsy family, it's very hard to own being an artist. If any, it's one of the biggest struggles, the internal struggles, is to actually own being an artist and give it that kind of value from yourself, because, basically, it's like I was kind of brought up to think of art as a kind of Ponzi, kind of daft thing that didn't really kind of lead to a proper job or anything like that, so don't kind of do it, basically. And I think that, but you have to kind of give yourself permission. That's what I wanted to get at with that character. So I think that the obsessive compulsive thing, but also the kind of maybe the giving permission of the person who's an artist who wants to give themselves permission to do it is probably what she was getting at, or maybe what she saw. But I wouldn't speak for her, or she'd give me a kicking if I did, actually. So I can't.
She's a very long way away right now. You're probably.
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Fuck yeah. That's what she meant.
Well, taking the ways in which you like Lena for a moment then, and the artistic thing, how long before Trainspotting came out were you an aspiring writer? How early did you know you wanted to write?
I think that I'd always done it through music. I'd always written when I wrote songs, I realised I was always drawn towards ballads. I was always drawn towards kind of balladeering and telling stories. And I realised that the music element of what I was doing just wasn't very good, basically. So get rid of it, just kind of make a virtue of necessity and become a kind of storyteller. And the kind of genesis of that for me was when I got into house music, and a guy called Kevin Williamson, a friend of mine in Edinburgh, and I set up this club called Invisible Insurrection, and we put on a lot of poets and kind of people reading stories. Everybody was fucked up on ecstasy and dancing their legs off the night before. We thought, let's get an early morning club where people can sit and chill out in beanbags and kind of sort of drink coffee and smoke a bit of spliff and just come down from the exertions of the night before and maybe listen to a bit of performance poetry. And I thought, the people that were up there reading poems and stuff like that, I thought, I can do that. So I got up and did some of that too, and that then I thought, well, I'm at this age now that I've kind of failed miserably in everything that I've tried to do that I've liked, I'm I'm obsessed with football and boxing, shit footballer, shit boxer. I'm obsessed with music, kind of terrible musician, So there must be something that I actually like, that I can actually do. And just through being a serial failure, I think most writers are serial failures because nobody really wants to be a novelist. Like, you know what I mean? It's like kind of, everybody's going to shag a lead singer in a rock band, but nobody's going to fucking shag a novelist. Or something, Unless they're a bit crazy. Thankfully, there are some that are crazy. But by and large, so you think, this is my last chance to do something creative that's going to kind of fulfill me. Yeah.
As far as the last chance effort went, it paid off all right, I guess. You went from being a failure at everything, as you put it, to Trainspotting. How was that? Did your family change their mind about the virtues of you being an artist then?
Yeah, I think everybody did. I kind of, you kind of... it happened very quickly in a way, it's sort of... but it's funny the way that things get perceived, back in Edinburgh when I'd sold, when Trainspotting had sold 1,000 copies, in the first few months, everybody was going like, brilliant, everybody's patting me on the back, buying a pint, this guy's representing us, this is our boy, And I was kind of exalted and all that, and I was the local hero. And And then when it sold 10,000 copies, it was like, what's this kind of fucking... 100,000 copies, it was like, you know, this bastard has fucking sold us out, you know? fucking wanker. 1 million copies, I didn't stick around by that time, I'd left the country, you know, and it was like... but you can kind of, you can see that point of view, because it's like, that kind of phenomenon of Trainspotting, it started off as my book, and then it became Danny's film, then it became Ewan's poster, and then it became Richard Branson's fucking train adverts, like, you know. So all the time it's getting further away from, you know, the book is still the very same. I've not done a thing to the book, you know, but it's mushroomed and it's become something kind of bigger, and it was co-opted into that whole Britpop scene, which was the kind of requiem mass of British culture. It's when we sold off all our culture to the global marketplace, you know, and we stopped making culture, and we can now just have a major. We have Simon Cowell instead of Tony Wilson now, you know, and that's where we're at now. But
that's the most depressing thing anyone's ever said on a stage.
It is. It's utterly depressing, like, you know. So, but that's basically what happened to our culture. But Trainspotting was that last big flush, that last kind of that last big party of British culture that was the 90s. That last big requiem mass, and Trainspotting was the sort of was the kind of, you know, that was the flagship cinematic expression of all that.
Last year, the film adaptation of Filth came out, and I would argue that that's easily the best adaptation of your work since Trainspotting, and I may even like it more as an adaptation. What do you think of it?
I think it's right up there with Trainspotting, and I can't say enough about, like, John Baird, who was the director of Filth. He wasn't only the director, he was the screenwriter, and he was a producer as well. So John was a bit like Andrew MacDonald, John Hodge, and Danny Boyle rolled into one. You know, he was the kind of the sort of who's that superhero guy that has the powers of all the Fantastic Four?
Anyone?
That guy.
Come on, help us
Somebody
out.
will know. Super Skrull. They got it, like
security.
Nerd alert. I knew that as well, but it was too cool to say. But yeah, man, Super Skrull is John's kind of like Super Skrull. He's got all these different superpowers of filmmaker superpowers, and he got James McAvoy on board, who is just a phenomenal actor, and these pair really hit it off. They were like they were like twins, you know, sort of the wee guy from Port Glasgow and the wee guy from Aberdeen. Just and they were, you know, it was a great project to be involved in, because they had there was a similar vibe to it. You know, it's like you know when somebody's really into a book. I mean, it's like when John Hodge used to sort of send me notes on the Trainspotting adaptation. You could tell, and Danny Boyle did too, and you could tell they were just so into the book that the film was going to be fantastic. You know, they were just so into the source material. But, you know, obviously they respected it was a different medium, and they wanted to do a really good cinematic kind of interpretation of it. But they were just so into the book. And John Baird used to email me in characters from the book back and forward, and I thought, I had to read the book again to keep up with them, because you don't read old books. You know, when you've written a book, it's the furthest thing from your mind, unless it's an adaptation, and you have to get working it again. You don't want to read it. You don't want to see it ever again, basically. But he knew every character in it, so I had to keep up with them. You know, and what I realised he was doing, it was just his way of getting into the whole thing, and then he produced a screenplay, which kind of sort of blew me away, really, because I'd worked with so many different directors and writer-directors and all that to get this on the go over the last 10 years, and none of them were that good, really, but he was just so brilliant, like.
Mm. It's funny because the book is a really disturbing book in many ways. When you read it, you're in the head of someone who's not terribly well. The film captures the sadness of that, and it still manages to be funny as well.
Well, it's the thing. I mean, it's like, because we we were very determined that the actor that we cast in the film would have to be somebody that people like. You know, I mean, James McAvoy is a very likable character. He's a very likable person. He's got a very likable kind of screen persona. And when you get an actor that's like that, I mean, Ewan McGregor is as well as Renton is a very likable guy. People like these guys, so they let them off with doing kind of bad things, basically. And we needed that quality in an actor, but we also needed somebody who had the range to deliver that kind of pathos, you know, that side of it, because it could have been a bit, if it was just a guy who was being misogynistic and kind of and racist and, you know, and violent and manipulative. It could have just been a bit of a kind of loaded magazine, kind of sort of wank boys, kind of sort of kind of guys in the pub patting each other on the back and all that. And we wanted it to be a lot deeper and a lot more kind of disturbing than that, really. And you need an actor, you need somebody of that kind of quality who can elevate it, you know, to that kind of level, because it could have been kind of if the bar hadn't been set so high, it could have been quite an embarrassing film, actually, if we hadn't had that kind of performance.
Yeah, I'm interested that you know, in the adaptations you talk about looking for that likability, because so many of your characters are monstrous and they do monstrous things. How important is it to you that there's a kernel of likability in them? And do you like all your characters?
Yeah, I mean, what I tend to see it as, I mean, I tend to see it as people who are having a bad day at the office, really, rather than being really bad bastards. I like to get people when they're having a bad time. You know, it could be their kind of, you know, their year on cocaine, basically, or it could be their kind of their year when they're getting over a big relationship breakdown or a big bereavement, or they're having mental health issues and all that. And getting characters like that at quite a vulnerable stage and sort of pushing them towards other characters. And, you know, when things are going bad for us, when things are going well, we make the wrong decisions sometimes and just fuck things up. When things are going bad for us, we make the wrong decisions sometimes and fuck things up even more. So I'm interested in this mechanism by how people fail, because failure has always fascinated me. I think it's far more interesting than success. And it's basically it's much more about the human condition. You know, we kind of, you know, we're ultimately designed to fail, you know, and we have successes and failures on the way. But I just, it kind of fascinates me. And I like to get people in this kind of vulnerable state who are having a bad time. And But they're not necessarily going to be like that all the time. I mean, you can see, like in the Bruce Robertson character, you can see that he was probably a nice guy at one time. He was a kind of decent kind of family man trying to do the right thing. And when things started to fall apart for him mentally, he embraced the kind of false certainty of racism and misogyny, because these are things about kind of when you try to make yourself feel better by putting other people down, you're not really making yourself feel better. You're just underscoring how fucked up you are, really. So that's what that's what the character was kind of grasping at. But I think what you have to do is you can show characters being as dark as you like, but you have to show that they're kind of groping for the light switch, you know, or they've come from a good place before, and that's the kind of sadness I think that. People identify with, and I think that's why they stay with characters that are in this kind of sort of pretty fucked up position, because they know that they're not always like that, and hopefully they're maybe not always going to be like that.
In Sex Lives of Siamese Twins, it's almost more the case that the characters provide a counterpoint to each other's worst characteristics. Lucy doesn't seem to be groping for the light switch so much as she is groping for something to hit someone with.
Yeah, I mean, I think with her, I mean, it's like, if you look at these two characters, they've both had kind of traumas that have not come to terms with. I mean, Lucy's had a sexual assault when she was a young woman that she hasn't really sort of dealt with, and she has dealt with in a way that makes sense to her by trying to be as tough and as hard and as possible. But So that this is never going to happen to her again, and it probably won't happen to her again because she is very sort of physically and mentally kind of sort of strong and resourceful. But she hasn't actually dealt with the ramifications of that trauma. She just kind of repressed it. And Lena's had this thing where kind of she's been bullied as a kid, and a friend has committed, a close friend has committed suicide. And she's not really kind of sort of addressed that or kind of dealt with that either. And she's kind of, her anxieties have kind of been treated, have been treated by her overeating to get that short-term kind of sugar kind of spike and all that. So, it's like, so one needs to chill out, and the other one needs to kind of sort of, kind of liven up a bit, so they do see that in each other. I think there's that kind of there's that sort of subconscious level where they are. I think they are actually drawn together because they see that one's got something the other one could use.
You make it sound so healthy, and yet having read the book, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone in the audience. But that is delightful. There is a chance for you to ask some questions of Irvine.
G'day, Irvine.
Hi.
Could I call you on the idea that your bad characters are just having a bad day? If I think about Begbie, if I think about Sick Boy, if I think about Lucy in this one, it's not a bad day, it's an entirely bad life. And one of the things that occurs to me in reading them, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is that they just don't know what they're doing. It's a lack of self-awareness, which is their worst characteristic. And I wonder if you're chiming with that or aware of it.
I think it's a fair point for some of the characters that you've mentioned. I don't so much think Lucy, but I certainly think Begbie and Sick Boy would be guys who one is psychotically violent, and the other one is kind of very, very manipulative. And I think that there isn't an empathy in either of those characters. That they don't really see how their behaviour affects other people. There's a kind of overwhelming narcissism in these two characters, and you kind of think that they won't really. There's that kind of sociopathic thing that these two in particular won't realise what's going to happen, how their behaviour is going to affect others. I think with Lucy, there is a kind of journey that she's on. There is a kind of sense of getting back in touch with herself, and I think with other characters that I've written in the past, there is that kind of thing going on too. Even with Bruce Robertson, I think that he's kind of, in a sense, that it sounds a weird thing to say, but I think his suicide is quite a virtuous act because he knows he can't make himself any better, and he knows he's just going to sort of continue to mess people up, and ultimately he doesn't really want to do that, So, yeah, I mean, I think it's like there is a kind of in certain characters, there is a kind of empathy, the lack of empathy, and you quite like to see these guys get their comeuppance. The other ones that are actually trying, that are trying to kind of, as I say, grope for the light switch, I think you're more inclined to root for them in the sort of in their journey that they're on.
That's part of the tragedy of Skag Boys, is as a prequel, it's set up so that we know the fate that awaits each of those characters, and so. I think that's a book where your own capacity for empathy shines through enormously. You make us care about these characters at the same time as we know that they're as doomed as the rest of Thatcher's Britain.
I think so. I mean, with that book, as you say, because it's a prequel, you know what's going to happen to most of them, and you know that some of the guys are like the people in the landing party in Star Trek. The ones in the orange jackets that aren't going to come back, basically.
Red shirts.
Yeah, but it's like I think with that one, so it can't be a what happened. It has to be a kind of why did it happen, and that was a whole different approach really for that novel. Mm.
Yeah. Hi, how you going? Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thanks.
Bit of a generic one, really. It's just I was wondering. I read your stuff to just escape, and I go back to your stuff regularly, and it takes me away, and it's awesome. And I was just wondering, do you have any authors or favourite music that you listen to over and over to a point of like mind-numbing repetition?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with music, I always keep going back to David Bowie. I just can't stop, you know, and you know, like David Bowie and Iggy Pop and all that other kind of artists come and go for me, but these guys are always fairly constants. And I think with writers, it's kind of strange. There's certain books that I keep coming back to all the time. I mean, I've read Ulysses now about 5 different times and different times in my life. And the first time I read it as a teenager, I just didn't get it at all. But there was something about it that I liked. And I went back to it in my early 20s, and I kind of still didn't get it, you know, but I got more out of it again, you know. And then when I read it in my 30s, it really started to kind of chime, and then, you know, reading it in my 40s was a big thrill, you know, when I got so much more out of it. And, you know, I just read it again a few years ago, and it kind of blew me away. It was like reading a different book each time, you know. So that's a kind of book that's a sort of a kind of box of tricks to me. I know that it's always going to offer me more. And it's not just the familiarity, but it shows me something different every time too.
When you started off, where were your allegiances? Were they in that, was it all, fuck this, it's for my mates, or was it to contend with them writers that you loved? Did you want to show them, you know, or kind of, you know, akin to them? Was it for your country, you know, your nation?
Right. I think it's a selfish thing, writing for me. You know, that sounds horrible, but it's like I don't really think a kind of readership, or I don't really, you know, it's like, I think you kind of, I think when you start off particularly, I think you want to write the books that you can't really read. Things that you're not seeing on the shelves. You kind of want to write that kind of book. It's like I've always been inspired by books that are really shit rather than brilliant books. You know, because if I read a brilliant book, I just go, bastard. You know, this guy's written a fucking great book. The cunt, fuck. You know? And if I read a book that's kind of, especially a book that's quite widely acclaimed, and you read it and it's not very good, you go, oh, we're going to take this cunt down, like, you know. So these are the books that have kind of inspired me. So I think that was a lot of my motivation when I first started writing.
To take down that cunt, James Joyce.
Yeah.
Just do him.
Hi, Irvine. Thanks for coming down again. You're one of my favourites. But my question's more about, there's a lot of misogyny and violence against women in your books, and especially in my favourite one, like Marabou Stalk Nightmares. It's amazing, and I love the end of it. But I'm just wondering, are you actually a misogynist, or are you just like talking bullshit about women?
I don't see. I think what you have to do is like kind of. I think I was explaining about the thing with Bruce Robertson, and that people embrace things. In my view, people embrace things like misogyny and racism to make them to try and feel better about themselves. But it's a very kind of hollow sort of. It's a hollow kind of fix that they're getting at this kind of power tripping thing, and. No, I'm not. I don't see myself as a misogynist or a racist. You know, surprisingly, you know, although I would say that, but you know, I mean, nobody wants to. Nobody would say yes. I do hate 50% of the population. So it's not a tenable position for anybody, I don't think. But there is a lot of. I mean, when I wrote Marabou Stalk Nightmares, the genesis of that book came out. I was out with 3 women friends in a bar, and we'd been up clubbing all night, and they had that zero tolerance thing in Edinburgh, and it said like kind of 2 out of 5 women will be sexually assaulted by the time they're 16, and I thought that's pretty high, and the women I was with, they all turned on me and said, no, fuck no, and they were starting to talk about their experiences and the experiences of friends that they had, and I thought, it really shocked me, you know, that it was that was so prevalent, and I think that you write and you try to understand it in that kind of way, you know, you try to understand these issues in that sort of way, and I think, I mean, there's a lot of, if you look at this book, for example, there's a lot of female violence against men in it, particularly like Lucy kind of. seems to kind of, she gets through quite a few guys, basically knocks quite a few guys around in this book. So I think it's like it's more about it's more about trying to sort of it's more about trying to kind of bring up these issues of violence rather than celebrating them, hopefully.
How hard is that when you're writing characters who express fairly, thank you for your question, by the way, characters who express fairly poisonous views in different ways? The stuff Lucy has to say about fat people, for example, is pretty vehement. It's hard not to read that and think, wow, Irvine really doesn't like fat people.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of, you in some ways, you're right, you're kind of, you're flagging up these kind of views to get some kind of reaction from yourself. And it's like, I don't see how anybody could kind of think in a way that I don't like fat people, or, I don't like black people, or I don't like women, it just seems to be kind of, to me, it's such a strange kind of way to think about life. But, so when I do hear people express these views, I get quite a kind of, a kind of reaction to it myself. And it's like, I hate that kind of fiction where all that stuff is airbrushed out of it. That characters don't seem to have these kind of prejudices in fiction, most fiction. But yet, I kind of hear people expressing these kind of prejudices all the time. So to me it seems like there's a massive disconnect, and I think there's been a whole kind of there is a whole kind of movement that about kind of sort of hate speech and about sort of and about kind of the public expression of kind of racism and misogyny and all that, which I think is very, very healthy. And I think it does help. But I think that the overwhelming attitudes in psychology of characters can be very, very negative. And I think there has to be room in fiction to express the world as we see it and as we believe it to be, rather than just as we'd like it to be.
Question over here.
Hey, Irvine. How you going? Thanks so much for coming down. My uncle spoke before. He's taken me down here as well with his son, Ned, who's 16. I'm 27 and he's about 45. And the book's been passed through the generations. And I just wanted to ask you a question, whether you ever thought that would ever happen, whether your books would ever transcend sort of generations. Like, to be honest, when I was 16, I had no fucking idea what you were saying. Like, you are quite literally one of the most cryptic men in the world. Like, not only the like, see, cat, boy, fucking, all that kind of shit, but it's like the other stuff. I didn't know the drugs and that, Did you ever think that would transcend right now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because you don't really think about the impact that a book is going to have. I mean, I never thought I'd still be alive and around enough to see that impact. But it is interesting to see that it has kind of resonated down the generations. I mean, there's quite a wide variety of ages in the audience tonight, for example, and that's kind of been mirrored, wherever I go, really. But it's very, very flattering to know that a book still has that resonance, that it can go down, it can be passed down, and that you get people kind of like 3 generations in one family that have read Trainspotting, and that's kind of weird for me, because you start off. When I started writing, I probably started writing about kind of 28, that kind of horrible age when you first become aware that you're actually going to die. Your sense of mortality kicks in, and then it's like. But when I started doing the kind of writing and doing the readings, I was doing readings to basically people that were the same age as me. It was like kind of late 20s, early 30s kind of crowd. And then now I do, when I read in some places, particularly kind of college kind of campuses and all that, I'm getting older and the audience is getting younger, so it's like, it is interesting to see that these things do get passed down. And I think also when things get transferred into movies, when they get translated into movies, that gives you a whole different audience, because film's such a powerful medium. Thanks, buddy.
Sorry, that last bit was off mic. You might not have heard he said, "You're quite old, man." That was seemed a bit insensitive, I think. But what are you going to do? I'm sorry. A question over here.
Hi, Irvine. I hope Hearts going down with Hibs in some way makes some sort of compensation for you. The actual question I had was kind of about your writing peers. On Twitter, you were part of what I thought was quite a moving tribute to Ian Banks when he died, with the photo of the dram next to one of his books. I was kind of wondering whether you saw people like him. Was that a tribute just as a fan, or is there a kind of writing group that kind of exchanges these ideas with kind of Scottish authors?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tribute to Ian was kind of both as a fan. I mean, I kind of remember picking up The Wasp Factory when I was, and it's one of these books that you think, this is just so good. He was one of the books that you think, fuck, I'm never going to be able to do anything as good as this. But it was just very kind of inspiring to find a guy from Scotland kind of writing that kind of fiction to that sort of standard. That was just really gripping and arresting. And but also, it's like, you know, I mean, I wasn't kind of big close mates with him, but I got to know him over the years, and he was a very lovely guy. And I just wanted to kind of, just in a very kind of friend way, just to sort of acknowledge, you know, both a great writer and an excellent guy. So a bit of both, really. I mean, because Ian was a wee bit older than the kind of Rebel Inc. crowd, you know, Kevin Williamson and Duncan MacLean and Barry Graham and Gordon Legg and people like that were kind of all writing at the same time in Edinburgh, Alan Warner, and we were all quite kind of sort of close pals. So there was a kind of, not so much a community, because we never really went out and talked about literature so much as kind of went out and went drinking and, you know, went to football or went raving, you know. So, but you were aware that these people were doing stuff as well, you know, similar stuff. Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's always nice if it's a kind of movement of writers, if there's a big bunch of you kind of are doing something at the same time in the same city.
More a question about character development. As someone who lives in other parts of the world and observes people and try a bit of writing myself, do you ever translate characters from other parts of the world into your books to other nationalities? Like, was Juice Terry somehow Hank Soda in America or something like that, you know? And how does that... Do you ever really...
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I'm not kind of... I think that what you see, characters to me are like, they're like, you know, if you've got a theme you want to explore in fiction, the characters are basically the tools to help you do that, you know, and sometimes it's like you can look into your kind of, your box of tools, the people, the ones that you've already created. Other times, like with this new book, you have to forge new tools, you know, you have to sort of make the new characters so they can tell the story that you want to tell. Yeah, I mean, I haven't kind of transposed. I mean, what is interesting is when, well, actually, when you've just reminded me, we did a Trainspotting USA play, and you did actually have a kind of a Kansas Begbie and Spud and Renton and Sick Boy, which was quite interesting. I mean, it's like the one that didn't work so well was Begbie. And we tried to work out why that was, and it's because sadly, as you can see with this nutter in Santa Barbara that kind of shot up these women for, you know, because they wouldn't sleep with them or whatever. The American violence is very much about, it's very remote, it's very kind of cold, it's about the kind of gun. Whereas Scottish violence is very much up close and personal and sort of kind of about the blades and all that kind of stuff. So Begbie kind of didn't really work. We had to make him into a very different character. So that was interesting. But the rest of them did transpose. But it's nothing that I would kind of... That was the dramatist, the guy who did the play. It's nothing that I would personally consider doing. I'd be more interested in making new characters that fitted the scenario.
you may feel differently when you're adapting Trainspotting for Broadway as a musical.
It could happen.
I could see it happening easily.
I remember reading in an interview that you'd said when you first started writing Trainspotting, you felt indebted to people like Alistair Gray and James Kelman that had come before, that made you realise that writing about living in Scotland was sort of an exciting prospect rather than something that was dull, as you said before. I was wondering, considering now with the global success you've had, and those writers are sort of still not as widely read as they should be outside of Scotland, whether or not that sort of still... you still think about that and you still feel indebted to sort of the path they had paved before you yourself?
Yeah, very much. I mean, it's like you're always indebted to the people that have kind of gone before and blazed the trail, you know, and it's like, I mean, I've been fortunate to have a lot of success, but that success wouldn't have been as easy if it hadn't have been for people like James Kelman, Alistair Gray and William McIlvanney and all these writers before, you know, because you're going right back to people like, you know, James Hogg and Robert Louis Stevenson, and you know, so it's like I think there is in a place like Scotland, quite a small place, there is a kind of literary tradition. You can actually see it, that, you know, coming through, and I think you always have to be indebted to the writers that have gone before. Not that the bastards are getting any more royalty checks. There's no question of that ever happening, but you know.
And we're going to take one last bonus question to address the gender balancing questions a little bit.
So I was wondering if you've ever created a character that has perhaps like you felt that connected to, that you maybe fall in love with, and they become like a real in your life, or maybe even like a sex dream about them.
I'm not going to lie, that question went somewhere I didn't expect.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, when I was writing this, I mean, I had both hands on the keyboard all the time, even during the sections, I can assure you. But I kind of, I think that it's not so much that way. I think the characters, it's like, I mean, there's characters that you kind of love. I mean, like, I really love Spud and Trainspotting, you know, and I kind of saw, because everybody loves the kind of lovable loser, really, but I really do like writing that character. And he's a nice character to kind of write in a way, even quite a sad character in a lot of ways, but a nice one. The ones that kind of mark me are the ones that I find very difficult and troublesome and dangerous to write. We talked about Marabou Stork Nightmares, like the main character Roy Strang in Marabou Stork Nightmares, Bruce Robertson in Filth. You know, there's characters you don't want to spend too much time in their head, you know, and you want to get their kind of story told very quickly. But I think that, yeah, I mean, the ones that have kind of been, the ones that have been fun to write, I mean, I like characters that are kind of, that are quite out there and that are kind of, that are kind of transgressive, and they give you permission to kind of write transgressively, I think, too. So, I mean, the book I've just finished that's going to come out next year is kind of got one of my favourite characters in it, and he's a very sort of, kind of out there, kind of sort of fearless, transgressive character, and it's very good to have to get into that kind of character, because you know you kind of feel that you can take the gloves off and just go for it, basically.
And you may not want to give this away, but that forthcoming book, does it have a single word title, or a title which is like 15 words and deeply memorable?
It's a 3-word title, actually, so it's in between the two.
KG. And that title isn't Spring Breakers 2, which I understand you're also
writing. No. No, it's not. Spring Breakers 2 is a film we're going to shoot in probably in September when it gets a bit cooler in Miami.
There's a project I can't wait to see how it turns out. As with just about everything else from this man, please join me in thanking the extraordinary Irvine Welsh.
Thank you.